What was supposed to be the happiest day of her father's life turned into a chilling moment no one saw coming. At Mark Turner's lavish wedding, his 8-year-old daughter, Kira, stands quietly in the corner, her eyes dark with a secret she can't keep any longer. As laughter fills the grand hall, Kira tugs on her father's sleeve and whispers something in his ear, something that makes him go pale. Within minutes, he's on the phone with 911, his face etched with fear. But what could a little girl say to bring an entire wedding to a standstill? And why did her words send a ripple of terror through the celebration? Prepare yourself for a story that weaves suspense, danger, and a chilling revelation that will leave everyone questioning. How well do we really know those closest to us? Emma Watson had never been one for weddings. The saccharine joy, the perfectly curated moments, the overwhelming optimism that seemed to seep into every corner of the event. It just wasn't her thing. But when the invitation from Mark Turner had arrived in her mailbox a month ago, Emma had felt a sense of duty, or maybe curiosity, pulling her in. She hadn't spoken to Mark in years, not since their college days when they'd been friends, but hearing about his remarriage had piqued her interest. Mark had been through a bitter divorce, and from what Emma gathered, it hadn't just been emotionally draining but financially devastating as well. Yet here he was, about to marry again, his bride-to-be a stunning woman named Emily. A picture-perfect wedding awaited her at an estate that looked straight out of a magazine. Glistening chandeliers, sprawling gardens, and every element of sophistication money could buy. Emma had been a detective for nearly a decade. Private investigation wasn't exactly the most glamorous of jobs, but she'd seen enough of life's underbelly to know that nothing was ever as perfect as it seemed. She arrived at the estate with a sense of unease, a feeling she couldn't shake. Maybe it was just the ghost of her investigative instincts, or maybe it was something more. Inside, the wedding unfolded as one might expect. People mingled, laughing, toasting to the happy couple, while the ceremony played out in front of an awestruck audience. Emma kept to the back of the room, her sharp eyes observing every interaction, every facial expression. Her attention kept drifting to one person in particular, Kira, Mark's 8-year-old daughter from his first marriage. Kira was a striking little girl. Her dark skin was luminous against the white lace of her dress, and her tight curls were pulled back into a simple, elegant bun. But it wasn't her appearance that drew Emma's attention. It was her demeanor. Unlike the other children present who ran around giggling and chasing each other, Kira stood apart, silent and withdrawn, her eyes fixed on her father and Emily with a piercing intensity. There was something about her that made Emma uneasy. Children, especially those who had gone through difficult family dynamics like Kira's, often carried burdens far heavier than their young shoulders should have to bear. Emma couldn't help but feel like there was a storm brewing behind Kira's dark, thoughtful eyes. The ceremony proceeded without a hitch. Mark and Emily exchanged their vows, kissed, and the guests erupted in applause. But as everyone clapped and celebrated, Emma caught sight of Kira again. The little girl hadn't moved. Her eyes had not softened or smiled. Instead, they had narrowed. There was something wrong, and Emma felt it in her gut. As the guests began to shift toward the reception hall, Emma decided to keep a close eye on Kira. The reception was a grand affair. Champagne flowed freely, and a live band played a mix of old classics and modern hits. People were dancing, talking, and laughing, immersed in the joy of the moment. But Emma couldn't focus on any of that. Her attention kept drifting back to Kira, who was now standing by one of the grand windows that overlooked the garden. Emma moved toward the girl, her shoes silent on the polished wooden floor. "Hey there," she said softly, coming to stand beside Kira. Pretty big day, huh? Kira didn't respond right away. She kept her gaze fixed on something outside, something that only she seemed to see. "It's not a big day for me," she finally whispered, her voice so soft Emma had to strain to hear her. Emma frowned. "Why do you say that?" Kira turned her head slightly, her eyes locking onto Emma's with an intensity that startled her. "Because she's not who she says she is," Kira said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My dad, he doesn't see it, but I do." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Who? Emily?" Kira nodded. "She's hiding something. Something bad." Emma was caught off guard by the certainty in Kira's voice. Children often had sharp instincts, but this felt like more than just a child's suspicion. There was fear in her words, and fear that came from somewhere deep. Emma leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "What do you mean, Kira? What is she hiding?" Before Kira could answer, Mark passed by, laughing and joking with some guests, his glass of champagne half empty. Kira seized the opportunity and darted toward him, grabbing his coat sleeve and pulling him down to her level. Mark knelt down, his smile fading as Kira whispered something into his ear. Whatever she said, it made him freeze. His face drained of color, and for a moment he looked utterly lost. Then, without another word, he stood up and reached for his phone, his fingers trembling as he dialed a number. Emma watched as Mark rushed to the far corner of the room, speaking urgently into the phone. She couldn't hear his words, but the look on his face told her everything she needed to know. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. Curiosity got the better of her, and she moved closer to where Mark was standing. As she approached, she caught a few snippets of his conversation. "Yes, this is Mark Turner. I need the police at the Turner estate immediately. My daughter said she saw him again. No, I don't know who he is, but she's seen him before. Please hurry." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. Him. Who was this man that Kira had seen? Why was Mark calling the police? She needed answers, and she needed them now. She hurried over to Mark, her heart pounding in her chest. "Mark, what's going on?" she demanded, keeping her voice low enough that the other guests wouldn't overhear. Mark ran a hand through his hair, looking pale and shaken. "Kira. She says she saw a man outside. A man she's seen before. Someone who's been following us." Emma's stomach dropped. "Following you? For how long?" Mark shook his head, his eyes filled with confusion and fear. "I don't know. She mentioned it once before, a few months ago, but I thought it was just a child's imagination. Now I'm not so sure." Emma glanced back at Kira, who was standing by the window again, her small fists clenched at her sides. This wasn't just a case of an overactive imagination. Kira was genuinely afraid, and Emma's instincts told her that the girl had every reason to be. "Did she say what this man looks like?" Emma asked, her voice steady, despite the growing sense of unease. Mark nodded. "Tall, dark hair, always watching. That's all she's told me." Emma felt a knot form in her stomach. If Kira had seen this man before, and he was following them, this was no coincidence. Whoever he was dangerous. "We need to find him," Emma said, her voice firm. "If he's here, he won't stay hidden for long." The police arrived within minutes, their presence sending a ripple of confusion through the guests. The reception came to an abrupt halt as officers in uniform entered the hall, scanning the crowd and speaking quietly into their radios. Mark was pacing nervously near the entrance while Emily stood nearby, her face a mixture of confusion and annoyance. "What's going on, Mark?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Why are the police here?" Mark hesitated, glancing at Kira, who was still standing by the window. "It's complicated," he muttered. "I'll explain later." Emily's frown deepened. But before she could press further, one of the officers approached Mark. "Mr. Turner, we've secured the perimeter," the officer said. "We'll do a sweep of the grounds and the house. Can you tell me more about this man your daughter saw?" Mark relayed the description that Kira had given him. Tall, dark hair, always watching. The officer nodded, his expression serious. "We'll keep an eye out. If this man is here, we'll find him." Emma watched the exchange from a distance, her mind racing. Something didn't add up. Why would a man be following Mark and Kira for months, only to show up at the wedding? What was his endgame? Was he after revenge? Money? Or was it something more sinister? As the police began their search, Emma decided to take matters into her own hands. She approached Kira once more, her voice soft and reassuring. "Kira, I need you to tell me everything you remember about this man. Anything at all." Kira hesitated, glancing nervously toward her father. I don't want to make him mad," she whispered. Emma knelt down beside her, meeting her gaze. "You're not going to make him mad, sweetie. You're helping us. You're helping your dad. We need to know what's going on." Kira took a deep breath, her small hands trembling. "He's been following us since we moved into our new house. I see him in the garden sometimes, just standing there, watching. I told Daddy, but he didn't believe me. He said it was just my imagination." Emma's heart ached for the girl. To carry such fear and not be believed, it was enough to break anyone, let alone a child. "But tonight," Kira continued, her voice shaking, "he was here. I saw him in the garden again. He was standing by the trees just like before. I think he's here to take me." Emma's blood ran cold. "Take you? Why would he want to take you?" Kira bit her lip, tears welling up in her eyes. Because he used to follow my mom too, before she left us." Emma's heart skipped a beat. Kira's mother had left the family shortly after the divorce, or at least, that was the official story. But Emma was beginning to wonder if there was more to it than that. As the police combed the grounds, Emma's mind raced. If this man had been following Kira's mother, then it was possible that he had something to do with her disappearance. Maybe Kira's mother hadn't left voluntarily. Maybe she'd been taken, just as Kira feared she would be. Emma's thoughts were interrupted by a commotion near the back of the ballroom. She turned just in time to see two police officers dragging a man toward the entrance. He was tall, with dark hair, just as Kira had described. His face was twisted in a sneer, but his eyes were wild, unhinged. Mark's face drained of color when he saw the man. "It's him," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Oh, God, it's him." The man struggled against the officers, shouting incoherently as they dragged him out of the ballroom. Emma caught a few words, something about Kira's mother, about revenge, but it was all jumbled, nonsensical. As the man was led away, Kira clung to her father, her small body trembling. Mark wrapped his arms around her, his expression one of shock and disbelief. The man was taken into police custody, and the wedding reception slowly began to wind down. Guests whispered amongst themselves, unsure of what had just happened, but the sense of unease lingered in the air. Mark approached Emma, his arm around Kira, who had finally calmed down. "Emma," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, "thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here." Emma shook her head. "You don't need to thank me, Mark. It was Kira who saved the day." Mark glanced down at his daughter, his eyes filled with gratitude. I should have believed her from the start. I should have protected her." Emma placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression gentle. "You're protecting her now. That's what matters." As Emma watched Mark and Kira walk away, she couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The danger had passed, but the mystery remained. Who was this man? And what did he really want with Kira and her mother? Those were questions that would have to be answered another day. For now, Emma was content, knowing that Kira was safe, and that the darkness lurking in the shadows had been brought to light. As the moon rose over the estate, casting long shadows across the garden, Emma turned and walked away, her mind already shifting to the next mystery that awaited her.